Hi guys, so I'm finally back from my summer vacation, as you would call in the US. I just call it summer holidays here. But I'm finally back after 2 weeks. I've been away for 2 weeks and I'm back with a movie review for Midsommar. And it is a good one to start off me coming back because Midsommar is about a group of tourists that go abroad on our summer vacation. Midsommar is the 2019 horror movie directed by Ari Aster and it stars Florence, Pugh, Jack Reynor and Poulter. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I'm going to give you my quick thoughts about the movie first of all, and then I'll go into the reasons why I liked it or hated it. And to be honest, I absolutely hated this movie. A couple travels to Sweden to visit a rural hometown's fabled midsummer festival. What begins as a nice summer retreat devolves into an increasingly violent and bizarre competition at the hands of a pagan cult. Okay, so I hated the movie, but it doesn't mean that the movie was completely bad, and it doesn't mean that you're going to hate the movie either. Now, I'm an artsy horror movie guy. I do like the artistic horror movies like The Babadook, It Follows, and I loved Hereditary from last year, which was Ari Aster's other horror movie. But this, for some reason, I just couldn't get into. I think the difference between this movie and Hereditary was a story that some people could relate to, even though it had supernatural elements to it. It had something that we can, as a viewer, latch onto, stuff that we've experienced ourselves. Not a lot of people do these midsummers, which are proper festivals, which I'll get into, but not a lot of people have experienced what they're experiencing in this movie. So maybe that's why I felt distant from Midsommar, whereas Hereditary I felt more of a connection with. The story of Midsommar went nowhere. It had this complicated plot to a very simple idea. It was quite predictable after the unpredictable happened. I can't give much away because this is a spoiler-free review, but leading up to a point where we thought something was going to happen, it didn't. Something unpredictable happened, but after that you could tell the story for the last hour and a half. Some people said the story dragged for the first hour and then it got better after that. I'm quite the opposite. I think the first hour, even though it was slow and it did drag, it was interesting. It built up something that I thought was going to be good, but it turned out that didn't happen. The first hour for me, I was on the edge of my seat. I thought this is very interesting. It's a slow burner. We know that that's what Hereditary was as well, but with Midsommar being 2 hours and 27 minutes long, I'm thinking, okay, the first hour's building is up, I'm on the edge of my seat, I'm ready for it, and then it just stops. It just goes into complete, I'd like to say madness, but stuff happens with madness, whereas in this movie, nothing happens. The beginning of the movie dealt with loss and grief. Again, I won't spoil anything, but it dealt with loss and grief, and they sort of explored the beginning of that film throughout plots of the movie to answer a few questions, but it didn't delve into it enough for or to justify the first 10-15 minutes of this film. The first 10 and 15 minutes of this movie dedicated itself to a specific story and a character in this film, and then when they brought it forward with the Midsommar, when they actually got to Sweden, they didn't explore it and it just felt pointless. They could have dealt with that a lot shorter and a lot better with the amount of time they went back to it when they were in Sweden, but the amount of times that they did go back to it and the amount of times they were into it, it just felt like a pointless beginning of the movie. If I have to compare it to another horror style movie, I would compare it to The Babadook. The Babadook dealt with loss and grief as well. It wasn't a horror movie, it was a psychological drama, but they dealt with that loss and grief with horror elements. In Midsommar, it's as if they tried to not copy The Babadook, but do something similar. And it just didn't work. I didn't feel the loss. I didn't feel the grief. Florence Pugh, who plays Danny, the main girl in this film, was amazing. She was excellent. She was a standout performance. But I didn't feel the loss and the grief throughout this film. She acted it well, but with the story, the way the story went, it just went nowhere. We delve into some relationship issues in this film as well. At the beginning, again, we deal with this relationship, so this is going to progress throughout the movie, I'm thinking or hoping. At the beginning, it seems like both Danny and Christian have issues with the relationship, and Christian seems to be only with Danny because of the problems that she's had, and he feels too bad to break up with her, and that's why she goes to Sweden to try and sort it out, as well as kind of leading her on as well. But when they get to Sweden, they don't really solve any issues, they don't attempt to solve issues, and then when things happen that are bad in a relationship, we don't get an explanation. I don't need an explanation for everything, but because they're focusing on it, we're hoping to see some sort of resolution behind it, but we don't. Again, I read into the history of Midsommar before doing this review. It was quite a good read. I actually enjoyed reading about Midsommar rather than the movie Midsommar. But a lot of it was quite eerily similar to the movie, apart from the cult aspect obviously and the killings. But a lot of it was quite similar. You had the maypole, you had the May Queen with the dancing around the maypole. That happens in real life. Depending on where you're from, Sweden, Finland, the UK, USA, it's all different, and it happens in June time. I didn't read everything about it, but a lot of it was really similar. Something that grabbed my attention was before they do the May dance, for good luck and for men, I think it was, the May Queens, or the girls, before they try to become a May Queen, they put 7 flowers under their pillow. If I'm reading that right, they put 7 flowers under the pillow for good luck. I did notice in the film that somebody put scissors underneath a baby's pillow. I don't know if that was for good luck or for a certain scene that happened in this film. I could probably say it because it doesn't give anything away, but those scissors they may have been used for pubic hair. There was an interesting contrast from this film to Hereditary. This film was very light and beautiful to look at, and almost like a good dream, not a nightmare but a good dream, whereas Hereditary was dark and gloomy and almost like a nightmare in every scene. They used a lot of darkness in Hereditary to scare you, but in this one they used a lot of light to scare you. Now it's harder to scare you in the daytime than it is at night in a movie, so something that Ari Aster done right was he used the light to scare us very well. I don't think a lot of directors could do what he did with the light, so I can't fault him for that. As well as the lighting, the cinematography again was beautiful. I think Ari Aster must have been a photographer, or he'd done some sort of photography, because every scene was a photographer's dream. The way the camera moved as well, he knows how to pan the camera perfectly. It was just beautiful. This is where one of my major problems is, and it does sound daft, but Ari Aster knows how good he is. He knows how good he is to the point where he's been very arrogant with it. Hereditary was different because that was his first big movie. This one, he knows how good he is, a director, and he tries to show us that all the time in every single scene. We don't have to see it in every scene, but his arrogance just showed in this film. For me personally, you might have a different opinion, that's fine, but for me every scene was too good. And I don't mean story wise, I mean the way it looked and the way it was acted out, with the way things were set out. Everything looked perfect, everything looked too good for this movie. Almost like a commercial, an advert in every scene. The way the camera moved, the way the lighting was, the way the shadows were, the way everybody was situated, it was too good. It does sound daft that I'm showing that as a negative. It is because of the way it was filmed. It's as if I'm Ari Aster, I'm the best filmmaker of all time, and this is how good I can do. But one thing it did leave out, and it was a big thing, was the story. He's made 2 big films now, and out of the 2 films, you've got this little noise that he likes to put into his movies. In the first movie that he done, Hereditary, you had that click, and you heard that throughout the film, and you got a little bit uneasy and, oh, what's that, something's coming. In this one, he's got these people doing these noises like they're trying to do a nice soft impression of Al Pacino. Like I mentioned, the acting from Florence Pugh was outstanding. She was great. She probably won't get an Oscar nomination because it is a horror movie after all. Everybody else was okay. They were forgettable as well. They didn't stand out to me. Their characters were one-dimensional, and that's another thing about the story that I didn't like. There was no characters that I got behind apart from Florence Pugh's character Danny. Everybody else was just throwaway characters. I did mention that it was beautifully shot. Some of the angles were great, but something that he'd done in this film that he shouldn't have done was, take this for example, right? You're looking at this glass, and Ari Aster's got some sort of fascination of zooming into this very slowly and slowly to get the viewer to look at it, to get your attention, and then all of a sudden after you've looked at it and you've paid attention, it cuts or something happens. Now in this film he does this too much and for too long. He'll show you this glass and he'll zoom in and he'll zoom in and he'll zoom in, and you're thinking, okay, I've seen it now, let's stop and cut to the next scene. But no, he goes that 20-30 seconds a bit too long, and it leaves you feeling a little bit uncomfortable, and not in a good way, in a bad way. You're thinking, just cut the scene, I can see it, just cut it and that's it. And that's what I don't like about it. That's why I think he's went overboard with Midsommar. Other things that he does that annoy me as well is they do something shocking in a scene, and you're thinking, okay, that's pretty shocking, and then the reaction to that shock, they overreact to it, and then they do it again. You're like, right, okay, it's getting a bit uncomfortable now and embarrassing. I actually felt embarrassed at times watching the film. Certain scenes, nothing to feel embarrassed about, but certain scenes that, say, people were screaming and they just kept screaming and screaming and screaming, and I'm like, okay, stop, because it's really annoying. I heard this was a very gory movie. It's not a very gory movie. There's a couple of gory scenes in this film, but it's a 2-hour 27-minute movie, so if you spread those couple of gory scenes throughout the film, it's not a gory movie at all. Certainly shocking at certain times, but not very, very gory. But the gory elements I did like. They didn't have the same impact as Hereditary did though. I'm comparing it to Hereditary because it is Ari Aster and it's his first movie. There's things that happen. This is another thing that annoyed me. You had these scenes built up and something gory and shocking happens, and then when it happened I was like, oh wow, that's shocking, let's see what happens now. But then the characters react in a way that's unrealistic, and because they act in an unrealistic way to what they've just saw, it just completely ruins the scene. Quickly on the ending of the film, I'm not going to mention what happens at all, but I was very disappointed in the ending of the film as well. I do like the kind of abrupt endings. I like the endings that tell you a lot. I like the endings that tell you almost nothing, but this ending left me feeling empty inside. If that was what he was going for, then he succeeded, but I didn't feel good about it. I just felt like this movie was a cop-out, and the ending was very stylistically identical to what happened, or not what happened, but the style of Hereditary's ending. Obviously the endings are completely different, but the way it looked, everything just felt like they was trying to redo Hereditary once again, and again Midsommar just did not work. I always try and force my wife to come and see horror movies with me. She doesn't really like horror movies, but I try and make her come to the cinema and see them anyway. And she decided to come and see Midsommar with me because she did admit it did look good, and I thought it was going to be amazing. This was one of my most anticipated movies of 2019, but I did look over at her a couple of times near the end of the film thinking she's going to be hating me for this, sitting almost 3 hours in the cinema for something like this. And I remember turning around to her at the end of the movie saying, that was good, wasn't it? And she just started laughing, saying no, that was the worst film she's seen in the cinema. It wasn't the worst film I've ever seen. I think stylistically, I can't say this was a terrible movie because it was technically a great movie. It was technically a great looking movie. In terms of story, I think the movie fell flat in its face. It's one of the worst films I've seen this year, unfortunately, and I didn't want to say that. I know I'm probably going to get a lot of hate comments with people saying you didn't like it because you didn't understand it. I did understand it. I understood what Ari Aster was trying to do as well. I do understand the art style movies. I really do like the thinking man's horror movie. I like the artistic horror movies. I also like my horror's cheese as well. So I do like stylistic horror movies. I like them better than cheesy horror movies, and this is why Midsommar was one of my most anticipated of the year, and I was just very disappointed. So that's my review for Midsommar, guys. If you have seen the movie, as always, leave your comments down below. Let me know why you liked the movie, if you did like it, and also let me know why you hated the movie, and do you think that the points that I made were valid? Anyway guys, thanks a lot for watching again, thanks for subscribing, I'll see you soon, bye bye.